On the morning of April 6, 2026, room 2154 of the Rayburn House office building filled to standing capacity. The House Oversight Committee's Subcommittee on National Security convened what multiple members would later call the most consequential UAP hearing since the modern disclosure era began. This was not a repeat of previous sessions. The witnesses brought documents, they brought sensor data, and for the first time in an open congressional hearing, they brought what they claimed was physical evidence analysis from a program the Department of Defense has never publicly acknowledged. What happened over the next 3 hours didn't just advance the UAP conversation, it fractured it, splitting the discussion into what we knew before April 6th and what we've been forced to reckon with since. This is what was actually presented, what Congress did with it, and what it means. To understand why April 6th mattered, you need the trajectory. Since David Grusch's July 2023 testimony before the same committee, Congress had been engaged in an escalating confrontation with the defense and intelligence establishment over UAP transparency. The Schumer-Rounds UAP Disclosure Act, initially introduced in 2023, was gutted in conference, but partially revived in subsequent legislative cycles. AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, released its historical review in March 2024, concluding it found no evidence of crash retrieval programs. Multiple whistleblowers and Inspector General findings contradicted that conclusion. By late 2025, the dynamic had shifted. The Intelligence Community Inspector General had made a formal referral to Congress in January 2026 regarding what was described as material omissions in RO's reporting to the legislative branch. 3 additional whistleblowers had come forward under the protections established in the FY 2024 NDAA. Representatives Tim Burchett, Anna Paulina Luna, and Jared Moskowitz, the bipartisan core that had driven oversight since 2023, secured the April hearing with subpoena authority. 3 witnesses testified in the open session. Dr. Vanessa Keller, a materials physicist who had worked as a contractor for a defense aerospace firm, testified that she had personally analyzed samples described to her as off-world alloys between 2019 and 2022 at a facility she identified only by its program designation. Colonel Marcus Briggs, USAF retired, testified regarding his involvement in what he described as a multi-decade containment and exploitation effort operating under Special Access Program protections. And Jonathan Mallory, a former intelligence analyst with the DIA, provided testimony about what he characterized as systematic efforts to mislead congressional oversight regarding the scope and findings of UAP-related programs. All 3 had previously provided classified testimony to the Inspector General. All 3 appeared voluntarily, and all 3 had legal counsel present from the same whistleblower protection firm that had represented Grusch. Dr. Keller's testimony was, by most accounts, the technical centerpiece of the hearing. She described being brought into a compartmented program in 2019 to conduct materials analysis on what she was told were samples recovered from aerospace vehicles of unknown provenance. She testified that her team conducted mass spectrometry, X-ray diffraction, and electron microscopy on 3 distinct samples over a period of approximately 28 months. Her key claim, at least one sample exhibited isotopic ratios inconsistent with known terrestrial, meteoritic, or synthetic production methods. Specifically, she cited an anomalous magnesium-zinc layered composite with magnesium-26 enrichment far exceeding any known natural or industrial process. She presented charts during her testimony, charts that had been reviewed and cleared for open session by the DoD's Pre-Publication Review Office, a detail she made a point of stating on the record. The fact that this data was cleared for public release, she said, should itself tell you something about what remains classified. Colonel Briggs provided what might be described as the structural map. Where Grusch had testified in 2023 that he had been told about crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs, Briggs claimed direct participation. He described a program architecture in which retrieved materials and allegedly intact craft were held not within traditional DoD facilities but under contractor-managed special access programs that exploited a legal gray area in Title 10 and Title 50 authorities. He named no contractors in the open session, but he referenced at least 4 defense firms holding materials under agreements that, he testified, had never been reported to the Congressional Intelligence Committees as required under the National Security Act. He described a legacy management structure that predated modern oversight frameworks, one that had, in his words, outlived the authority that created it. When pressed by Representative Moskowitz on whether he was describing an illegal program, Briggs paused. "I'm describing a program," he said, "that does not appear to have a legal basis that anyone I worked with could identify." Jonathan Mallory's testimony addressed what he called the information architecture of denial. As a former DIA analyst who had been assigned to support ARO's historical review, Mallory testified that he had personally flagged several programs and legacy files to ARO's leadership that were not included in their March 2024 report. He testified that at least 2 programs he identified, which he referred to only by their code designations in the closed session, were known to ARO's leadership, but were excluded from both the classified and unclassified versions of the historical review. His allegation was stark. The report Congress received was not merely incomplete due to access limitations. It was, in his characterization, curated to support a predetermined conclusion. He submitted documentation to the committee that he said corroborated his claims, internal communications and tasking orders. The committee accepted these into the classified record. The reactions from committee members were notably different from prior hearings. There was less grandstanding, less performative skepticism. Representative Burchett, who had been vocal about UAP transparency for years, was visibly subdued. "We've moved past the point of asking whether these programs exist," he said. "We're now asking who authorized them, who funded them, and who lied to us about them." Representative Robert Garcia pressed Keller on peer review, whether her findings had been independently replicated. She acknowledged they had not been published in open literature, but stated that 2 additional laboratories had conducted confirmatory analysis under the same program. Garcia called this the single most important loose thread in this entire hearing. Luna focused on the legal implications, asking each witness whether they believed crimes had been committed. All 3 declined to make that determination directly, but Briggs noted that failure to notify Congress of a special access program is not a policy violation. It is a statutory violation. Following the 3-hour open session, the committee moved into a closed, classified session that reportedly lasted over 4 additional hours. Members who emerged declined to discuss specifics, but several made public statements in the following days that were unusually direct. Representative Moskowitz told reporters that what he saw in the closed session fundamentally changes the oversight obligations of this committee. Garcia, typically measured in his public statements, said he now supported full subpoena authority over any contractor or agency withholding material from Congress. Within 72 hours, the committee formally requested that the Inspector General expand the scope of the January referral. By April 15th, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence had announced its own follow-up proceedings. The DoD issued a brief statement saying it remains committed to transparency and referred all questions to ARO, which declined to comment on specific testimony. It is necessary to hold this testimony to the same standard we would apply to any extraordinary claim. None of the physical evidence described by Dr. Keller has been subjected to independent, open peer review. Colonel Briggs's claims about program architecture, while consistent with the Grusch allegations and the Inspector General's referral, remain largely corroborated only by other whistleblower testimony, not by documentary evidence in the public domain. Mallory's claims about ARO are perhaps the most verifiable, and notably, ARO's silence in the aftermath has been conspicuous. Skeptics have correctly pointed out that isotopic anomalies alone do not prove extraterrestrial manufacture. Unusual isotopic ratios can result from exotic but terrestrial industrial processes. Keller acknowledged this during questioning, but maintained that the specific combination of properties she described had no known terrestrial explanation. The gap between testimony and publicly verifiable evidence remains the central tension of the entire disclosure effort. April 6, 2026, did not deliver definitive proof of non-human intelligence. No hearing can do that alone. What it delivered was something structurally more important: testimony under oath, backed by Inspector General referrals, supported by classified documentation from individuals with direct program involvement, not second-hand knowledge. The legislative machinery is now engaged in a way it wasn't before. Subpoena authority, expanded IG investigations, bipartisan, bicameral coordination. If the claims made on April 6th are even partially accurate, the implications extend far beyond the UFO question. They reach into the foundations of democratic oversight, classification authority, and the relationship between Congress and the national security state. The witnesses said what they said, under penalty of perjury. The documents are in the classified record. The question is no longer whether Congress will act, it's whether anyone will try to stop them.